Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye says she hopes South Korea, China and Japan can normalize a cooperative relationship after leaders of the three countries hold rare summit talks in Seoul. The defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States meet in Seoul today for talks centered on bolstering their alliance in the face of North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Plus, Russian officials say the Russian plane that crashed in Egypt broke up in the air, but stress it's too early to draw conclusions. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, November 2nd here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, the leaders of South Korea, China and Japan held their first Trilateral Summit in more than 3 years in Seoul on Sunday. Their agreements range from boosting economic cooperation to dealing with North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Our Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
With one voice, the leaders of South Korea, China and Japan sent out a strong message to North Korea.
북한의 비핵화 목표를 확고히 견지해야 한다는 점을 재확인하고 의미 있는 육자 회담의 조속한 재개를 위해 함께 노력해 나가기로 하였습니다.
That was one of the key agreements reached at Sunday's Trilateral Summit held in Seoul. Other areas of cooperation outlined in the joint statement that emerged from the summit include speeding up negotiations on their trilateral free trade agreement, as well as increasing civilian exchanges. The three countries also agreed on more cooperation in the environmental arena by preventing pollution and yellow dust. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe acknowledged President Park Geun-hye's efforts to revive their trilateral cooperation.
It's a breakthrough for the region and the three countries, Japan, South Korea and China, that we hold this trilateral summit for the first time in 3.5 years through the initiative of President Park.
While the three countries agreed to restore the annual summit, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang said sharing a correct sense of history is key to mutual trust. Japan's attempts to distort history, including its wartime sexual enslavement of women, had put off the trilateral meeting for the last 3 years.
We agreed to properly handle sensitive matters, including that of history, by squarely facing history while advancing toward the future. We also agreed to develop stable trilateral relations and bilateral relationships in all aspects.
The next trilateral summit will take place in Japan next year. On Monday, President Park and Prime Minister Abe will try to untangle their differences in what will be their first summit since taking office. But whether it will lead to any substantial progress in their bilateral relations still remains to be seen. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, the three leaders also attended a Trilateral Business Summit where President Park once again stressed the need to maximize the economic potential of the Northeast Asia region.
삼국 간 경제협력의 잠재력은 무궁무진하다고 생각합니다. 오늘 소중한 만남을 계기로 삼국 정상과 경제인들이 손을 잡고 동북아를 중심으로 하는 새로운 경제 질서를 만들어 나가기를 바랍니다.
Citing multilateral trade pacts like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and Trans-Pacific Partnership as examples of the growing trend toward regional FTAs, the three countries agreed to speed up their trilateral trade pact and work together to foster future growth engines. Over 400 business leaders from the three countries attended the event, which also connected job seekers to potential employers and various companies with buyers through one-on-one consultations. Now, taking a look at the reaction from the international media, which showed an interest, of course, in how relations between South Korea, Japan and China will it unfold after the summit. Many outlets emphasize the significance of the three countries having revived their relationship. The Associated Press said the three countries had agreed to reinforce a relationship that had been deteriorating due to historical and territorial issues. Japan's Kyodo News had a similar take on the meeting. China's Xinhua news agency highlighted plans for the summit to become a regular event. Now, economic cooperation was another focus, with Bloomberg detailing the country's efforts to conclude a trilateral free trade agreement, and Reuters reporting on the country's cooperation on the mega 16-nation regional comprehensive economic partnership deal. And staying with those talks, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe held a bilateral summit on the sidelines of the Trilateral Summit with South Korea, their first, in fact, since the two leaders took office. During the meeting in Seoul on Sunday, the two leaders are said to have shared views on sensitive issues, including historical and regional disputes, while agreeing on the need for improvements. Li is known to have urged Abe to face Japan's history in a sincere and responsible manner. And according to Chinese outlets, Abe said it has always been his principle to improve Japan-China relations, adding that he will adhere to peaceful development based on self-reflection of Japan's actions during the Second World War. Now, in other news, U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton is in Seoul ahead of a defense ministers' meeting. Upon landing on Sunday, Carter paid a visit to the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, where he called on North Korea to end its nuclear program. He also urged the regime to rejoin the six-party denuclearization talks involving the U.S., South Korea, China, Japan, and Russia.
We remain committed to achieving that negotiated outcome with North Korea, and believe that they should be on the path to doing less and ultimately zero in the nuclear field.
Now, Carter is scheduled to meet with his South Korean counterpart Han Min-gu on this Monday. The two will discuss an array of security issues, including enhanced bilateral defense cooperation and the transfer of wartime operational control of all forces in South Korea from Washington to Seoul. Korea's exports posted their biggest decline in 6 years last month, shattering hopes the country would be able to reach its annual trade target of $1 trillion. Park Geun-hye has the details.
It's the 10th straight monthly decline and the worst so far this year. Korea's trade ministry said Sunday what used to be the country's main growth engine, exports, came to $43.5 billion in October, plunging by 15.8% from the same month a year ago. That's the biggest fall in 6 years since an almost 21% on-year plunge in August 2009, right after the global financial crisis. Meanwhile, the country's trade surplus continued a 45-month streak, with imports falling even more than exports, with imports posting a 16.6% on-year decline last month. What's notable, though, is that the gap between the growth in exports and imports has narrowed. There was negative growth in almost all sectors except for mobile communication devices exports, which soared by 42%. Especially affected by continuing low global oil prices were petroleum and petrochemical product shipments, which fell more than 41% and 21% from the previous year. Cars, ships, and steel weren't spared either.
Given that the economic conditions outside of the country are bad, it will be difficult to bring about any effect from measures to revitalize Korea's exports in the fourth quarter of the year, which is expected to continue the trend of negative growth.
That's why most experts see it as almost impossible for the country to reach its annual trade target of $1 trillion, a mark Korea had hit for 4 years running. According to an official at the Trade Ministry, the forecast for November looks a little better than October, with improvements in the shipbuilding sector due to an uptick in orders. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now to the latest on the Russian aircraft that crashed over Egypt, killing all 224 people on board. Russia's top aviation official says the passenger plane seems to have broken up at high altitude. Alexander Nerenko, head of Russia's Federal Aviation Agency, made the assessment, saying the large area over which fragments were found indicates the jet disintegrated in mid-air. However, the official refrained from giving out more details, saying the investigation was ongoing. The aircraft crashed in the Sinai Peninsula on Saturday morning local time, 23 minutes after taking off from Sharm el-Sheikh en route to St. Petersburg. The Islamic State militant group claimed responsibility for the downing, but both Cairo and Moscow have downplayed that claim. Investigators are still analysing the contents of the aircraft's 2 black boxes, which were recovered shortly after the crash. Turkey's ruling AK party has won back its majority and will be able to form a single-party government again after a snap general election. With almost all ballots counted, AKP won almost 49.5% of the vote, with the main opposition CHP garnering 25.5%. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu has called the outcome a victory for democracy. The pro-Kurdish HDP crossed the 10% threshold, so it will have seats in the new parliament. The election was a rerun of a June poll in which the AKP surprisingly lost its one-party rule due to a surge in support for HDP. Now, hanshik, or Korean cuisine, was a hit at the Milan Expo 2015, where visitors were invited to sample popular dishes like bibimbap, galbijjim, japchae and kimchi. According to Korea's Culture Ministry, the Korea Pavilion attracted an average of 12,000 people a day, or roughly 2.3 million people, 10% of the total visitors to the event. The booth was comprised of a Korean restaurant and food exhibitions and was the 9th largest among the 45 national pavilions at the Expo. It was set up under the banner Hanshik, Food for the Future, You Are What You Eat. The Expo, considered one of the world's 3 biggest events with the Olympics and the World Cup, began on May 1st under the theme Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life. It wrapped up on Saturday. Now, Valentina Kozlova, a Soviet-born Russian-American ballerina, defected to the US in 1979 at the age of just 22, going on to become a principal dancer with the New York City Ballet. Since then, she's worked to discover new talent as the founder of an international dance competition and a ballet school bearing her name. Our Kim Ji-yeon sat down with Miss Kozlova to hear about her childhood in Russia and her views on ballet's future.
I used to perform whoever is able to see or hear me. So I was reciting poems and singing. At the time I had a voice, now I have no voice, and dancing, and a lot. I did this in public parks. And then my mother put me in a children's dance group. And then somebody seen me in class and seen me performing and suggested that I should apply for a Bolshoi ballet school, which I did. Wow. So that's how it was.
Well, let's talk about, after you've went to the US, you've defected. What were the major challenges when you defected?
I never told my mother I'm going to defect because you cannot. KGB are very professional people, and if she knew and tried to hide, they would squeeze out of her. And then God knows what would have happened to her.
They considered you as an enemy because it was right before the Cold War. Did you get any prejudice from around you, fellow dancers? Or?
Oh yeah, I was absolutely under the spotlight 24/7, and God forbid if I didn't do a clean pirouette or something, because immediately that they judge you, oh, she's not good enough. But what drove me to continue to do that, I wanted to be in the West. I wanted to be free. I want to work with many different choreographers and learn different styles. And I never regretted that I've done the step.
Also, 12 Korean dancers have been awarded in one of your international ballet competition this year. Tell us about that competition.
I want to preserve the classics Vaganova training. This is where it comes from. And the reason why Korean dancers get prizes because they carry on what we have in Russia. Second reason why they get medals because they're Korean dancers extremely innovative in modern, in contemporary dance, which I haven't seen before to that extent. So I fell in love with Korean contemporary dance, and I'm a classical dancer, and yet I just love what Korean dancers do it.
What is the future of ballet? Would it exemplify in the years to come, or should the ballet world work towards reaching out to the audience that are used to so many pop culture and TV?
I don't want ballet or contemporary to become pop. Ballet and contemporary, it's this theater art performing world. It's sort of secluded, yet it has to be promoted. If television can broadcast, live broadcast those performances, big performances that you have in Korea, that's probably the way to go.
Well, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Kim Ji-yeon there interviewing a legendary ballerina Valentina Kozlova. Well, that's all we have for now. Do have a great start to the week and a wonderful day, and thank you as always for watching. Goodbye.